And it's Fletch again at the bell. Impressive. I don't know what to tell you. Very, very impressive. I am going to switch over here and tell you that I have been working on some, I don't know, stuff to clear my head. And you're going to see about 3 movements of something over the course of the next few days. Have been trying to put together some stuff to clear my head. And so this is the first installment of that. I hope you enjoy it. I don't know. We'll see what you think. Let me know. This is a production of the Independent Brightweb. If you'd like to add your name to the list, send me an email and let me know. We're trying to build something here and make America real again.
Hey, I need to talk to you. Call me as soon as you can. Thank you. Bye.
From everything I've read, is that this RNA exists. You can capture it, you can sequence it, you can move it to other cells and recapitulate disease concern. The one thing I am confident of from everything I've read is that this RNA exists. You can capture it, you can sequence it, you can move it to other cells and recapitulate disease concern. The one thing I am confident of from everything I've read is that this RNA exists. You can capture it, you can sequence it.
And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie. You know, I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar.
This RNA exists.
I think it's like
you can
really
capture it, you can sequence it, you can move it to other cells.
I think, but you can tell if someone's lying.
The one thing I
it's literally turning into worst case scenario. I'm afraid that the latest data tells us that we're dealing with essentially a worst-case scenario. I'm afraid that the latest data tells us that we're dealing with essentially a worst-case scenario.
I'm not sure exactly who he is. His name is JJCouey, and I believe he's a consultant for CHD, and I believe he has a PhD in some sort of scientific discipline, from what I understand.
Actually have degrees in
Okay,
applied
over the
mathematics,
last 3 years,
immunology,
you have been
computational
subjected
biology,
to the most
biochemistry,
massive,
and, molecular
harmonized,
biology. Actually
globally
have degrees in
coordinated
applied mathematics,
propaganda
immunology,
campaign in the
computational
history of the
biology,
Western world. Full
biochemistry,
stop.
and molecular biology.
Okay,
Actually
the
have
last 3
degrees in
years,
applied
you have been
mathematics,
subjected
immunology,
to the most
computational
massive,
biology, biochemistry,
harmonized,
and
globally
molecular biology.
coordinated
Actually have
propaganda
degrees in
campaign
applied
in the
mathematics,
history of the Western
immunology,
world. Full
computational
stop.
biology.
I'm not messing around there. That hearing those people talk and stuff, it can really move me still. These people mess with me for so long. So many times I've felt like I was nuts. Thank you very much for being here, ladies and gentlemen, for enduring this with me.
We all know food costs too much at games, but what if I told you this slice and this beer and these hot dogs are all part of an illegal scheme perpetrated by billionaires?
I'm used to outrageous prices, but this is just a special kind of hella.
I'm at Madison Square Garden, not just for a mildly stale pretzel, but to meticulously catalog and quantify just how badly we're getting ripped off. All to prove a point. We don't have to live like this.
Sorry about that. That was a little slow. Hello, welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological. My name is Jonathan Couey. I come to you live from the back of my garage in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I am indeed live. I want to expand the library of content that we can discuss and still try to teach the same message to our viewers, our family, and friends, and learn to teach it to one another offline, because that's really about the best thing that I think I can give to you as my viewers, is ways to discuss this stuff with people offline, people around you. Whenever that conversation window opens up, you have to have the right way, the right judo. And so, although I don't consider myself an expert in this, I don't think the martial art has been invented yet. And so you can stumble along with me as we try to figure out how to do it. But I do think that we already have some good handholds that we can sort of exploit as we try to do this and move forward with some degree of optimism. So More Perfect Union, you can see up there in the corner, is a pretty well-developed YouTube channel with a number of reporters that do a number of stories. And this guy happened to be obsessed for a few months about the cost of concessions in our stadiums all across the United States. And fortuitously, serendipitously, I have recently had the good fortune of going to a Billy Strings concert at PNG Paints Arena. I don't know what it's called, something like that. And it was a very eye-opening experience because actually in this video, I think there's somebody who basically had the same experience as me. They walked up to the bar, there are no prices, and you can order a single or a double, and so you decide, well, I don't want to come back, and it's a pretty big glass, so I'll order a double. And the prices that you can pay are extraordinary. For example, when we went to this Billy Strings concert and I decided to get a Jack and Coke, I think I paid $28 for it, which is pretty remarkable markup. And so having been a bartender in my previous lives, it was shocking to see what they were doing there, and also not with gourmet food. And so this video is interesting because, again, the premise of the video, what are the working assumptions in this video? And the working assumptions are that there are billionaires, they own sports teams, and because they don't give a shit and can, they also screw everybody in every way possible, including like the seating license and I'm not disputing that. Okay, I'm not disputing that at all. But what this man and all of his viewers and the More Perfect Union should be realizing, of course, that if this is happening over hot dogs and pizza slices at baseball games, hockey stadiums, hockey games, and concerts, then what in the world is going on behind the curtain in our government, non-governmental organizations, the grants and the money and the subsidies that the government provides to corporations and all these entities that if this is happening, then shouldn't we be infinitely more concerned about the places where instead of ripping you off for 400% profit on a hot dog that you don't actually have to buy, maybe we should be more worried about, I don't know, where the waste, fraud, and abuse is in the actual government, where there are contracts that they don't even bother to write out all the zeros anymore. It's a fun video, though, and I like to start with fun videos, so I thought I'd start with this one. But it's just important to see that the working assumptions here are that somehow or another this is, I guess, in a reasonable scale of economic injustice, and I just don't think it really is. I think this is kind of funny, actually, to discuss this and to put this much time into what is already for 10 years been a pretty much unaffordable pastime for most people. I come from Chicago, where when I was living in Chicago, you could still get Cubs bleachers seats for like $10, and you just had to go buy them. And then this exponentially retarded thing happened in Chicago, and all the real estate and all the tickets and all the hats and all the coolness of it just skyrocketed. And I don't know what, that you can't get bleacher seats like that anymore. I can tell you that much. Anyway.
Because there is something felonious about these francs, and something we can do about it.
It's good that Vilma has got that in the chat. It doesn't actually surprise me given the content that they make, but sometimes they get very close, scripted, not quite, right? And I think this is a wonderful example of scripted, not quite. If your main focus is how people are getting screwed when they're already getting screwed, it's like compound retarded, because the people that can afford to whine about the fact that now I have to pay a $3,000 licensing fee for my $5,000 season tickets, and it used to be only, like, I get it. But I also don't. I mean, you know, like, just forget about the baseball team then. Like, that's what I would think. But anyway.
I should start with a story that for months now I've been obsessed with. The story of a guy who is fed up with skyrocketing prices and unprecedented inflation.
Now, I know what Arthur in the chat is going to say, and I don't want to keep interrupting the video, but it's absolutely, I can let it play, because what he's going to tell you is that there's a dude from way back who was working on it way back when. And that's an interesting part of the video, because there's an economic aspect of this that the he just kind of glosses over, but I can't help but to not miss it. So he's, free money. What Arthur's talking about is that none of these teams are building stadiums on their own dime. None of these teams are investing billions of dollars in the city that they're in and hoping to recoup a small fraction of that. Let's be reasonable here. These are highly subsidized things that these billionaires are guaranteed to win on.
Not today, but 1978, when a high school teacher named Ron Gordon waged a one-man war against the price of a hot dog. And I think part of my obsession was this. There was something we've lost since Ron's day that held the secret for how we can bring down the skyrocketing cost of being a sports fan today. I had to find him. So I packed my bags for California to figure out what he knew and what he could teach us.
You haven't used the word crazy yet. That's good. I'm Ron Gordon, friend of Alec Opperman, who's out here from New York, thinking, what a mistake I made.
In 1978, Ron caught wind that the price of a hot dog was going up by a nickel at San Francisco's Candlestick Park. The reason? A new health ordinance mandating that vendors wrap their wieners. That nickel would pay for the labor and bring the total cost to 75 cents. But to Ron, the math seemed wrong. He became convinced that the concessionaire, the Stevens Company, was pulling a fast one on Giants fans. And the owner, Bob Lurie, had his hands in the profits. He called everyone.
Ron, you have been, you lost a little bit of sleep doing this?
He called Stevens' meat supplier, got quotes on the price of the Doughboy wrapping machine.
I lost a lot of sleep. I spent a lot of time. I spent like 300 hours on this thing.
What Ron discovered was that Stevens would recoup their cost and a whole lot more.
The total amount of money which they take in would be $91,000, which is an awful lot of money, there's no question.
That's over $400,000.
The unfortunate thing, Vilma, is that they can't take them to see NCAA games anymore either. They're almost as expensive. It's kind of absurd.
Today's money. Ron took his beef to San Francisco's Park and Rec Board, who could veto the price hike. One suspicious piece of math was just how fast Candlestick could wrap a hot dog.
They were wrapping 2.47 hot dogs per person per minute in 1978. And a year later, I guess they got some practice at it, slowed it down, they were only wrapping 1.6.
And so we're not really seeing it, right? But we are seeing it. It's the prices. Because now we're talking about $16 hot dogs or $18 hot dogs. We're not joking around here. We're talking about $40 drinks, $25 beers.
Hot dogs per person per minute.
So Ron, in front of the Parks Board, proved them wrong.
I wrapped hot dogs while I was lecturing them about the wrong they were doing.
You wrapped 12 and they could only wrap 2.7. Right.
I know Rec and Park was irritated with me. The more elaborate I got, the less pleased they were. I gave them every detail in every order that I had gotten from the Giants.
Do you know how easy it would have been to defeat this guy with social media and actors on social media scripted to defeat him? Do you know how absurdly easy it would have been to just make his account invisible?
From them. I mean, they were waiting for me to finish and go away, and then they could leave the hot dog prices the way they were.
Jack may be nimble, Jack may be quick, but the 5-cent bite continues here at Candlestick.
Ron lost this battle, but the Wiener War wasn't over. Because behind Ron's gambit was an understanding that his local government had the power, even the responsibility, to do something about this. It started with who actually owns and pays for stadiums. In Ron's case, Candlestick Stadium was built using public money. It's the same for many stadiums today. Even after they're built, most stadiums get mountains of your taxpayer money because they claim they're a public good. Take, for instance, Madison Square Garden. They get a special break on property taxes that has cost New York hundreds of millions of dollars.
Think about the property taxes that you homeowners out there, I don't know how many people are homeowners that watch this show, they pay no property tax. They get property right smack dab in the middle of the most expensive property on earth, and they have to pay no tax at all, not just small tax, not a part tax, nothing.
In fact, most stadiums are exempt from property taxes. And what are we getting in return for all the free money we're showering on billionaire stadium owners a boost to the local economy? Not really. Study after study finds they are a terrible deal. And do we get affordable tickets? Obviously not.
I think the most useful thing that's happening here is that they're creating outrage over something that people care about. Outrage over something that people really care about. Like tailgating at Buffalo's games. They care about that shit. Tailgating at a Packers game before going in, that they care about that. The fact that they have season tickets and they're proud of having had season tickets for 20 years, and they give a shit about that. And so what this is actually doing is hitting people in the gut with people that, you know, that really care about something. It's not hurting the average casual guy that, you know, hey, I got a ticket, you want to come? Hey, you know, it's not hurting that person. It's hurting the person that really cares about the team, really sees it as part of their identity. And it's a real kick in the teeth. You could almost see it as like a controlled demolition of everything that's good in America. Almost like what they're doing with the NBA and how they're just not calling anything anymore, especially traveling. And, you know, it's becoming destroyed because that's what they want. They want to discredit everything. They want around the world the idea of America to mean something like Epstein, Gaza, I don't know what. I mean, and this is part of it because Americans are being encouraged to care about things that are very peripheral to their current governance.
1999 to 2020, ticket prices grew twice as fast as inflation. One driver of the continued increases, dynamic pricing. But billionaires get a great deal, a license to commit highway robbery at the ticket booth and concession stand.
Stadiums used to have shame. The business culture across the board, not just in stadiums.
It would be stopped in a year. All what everybody would have to do is just stop going. Just stop buying the tickets, stop watching, stop wearing the shirts. It would be so easy, it's kind of comical. And that's the problem. With social media, they can sustain this instead of the assemblage of some kind of meaningful response. They can fractionate, confuse, and even put out stuff like this that makes it seem like, well, at least somebody's out there doing something. I couldn't do something like this. So there's no, I mean, he must be, after this video, he must have done more, right?
Has grown more craven, more opportunistic, more willing to take advantage.
11 1/4 for a hot dog? A single hot dog?
PSA, don't get the double vodka lemonade at Madison Square Garden. It'll cost you $45.
Ron's 75-cent hot dog would, in 2025 dollars, cost you about $3.71. Today, in the same city, you'd pay $9 at a 49ers game. Consumed by this glizzy grift, I reached out to this guy you've heard from before, a lawyer and former government official who had some surprising news.
Charging too much for a hot dog in a stadium is already illegal under the prohibition on unfair practices, which most states already have on the books.
And because they don't have states' attorneys that do that, that are prioritized to do that, that are scripted to do that, that are encouraged to do that, then nothing ever happens. It's very, very simple. Most of the laws on the book, if they were really enforced, would put a lot of people in jail, put a lot of people out of business. But instead, we're talking about the 47 lawsuits of Donald Trump and all the things that went on in the Epstein files. And oh no, there's another picture and another picture. And it is actually governance by mythology. And this doesn't have to be mythology for it to be too peripheral to matter. Even the more truth in this, the better. These are not the billionaires you're looking for. You know, it's like the...
When you're in a stadium, you only have one choice. And what that means is the stadium has effectively monopoly power over you.
These unfair and deceptive practice laws can be wielded right now by state attorneys general, or even the federal government, to bring down prices. Regulators use them all the time for all kinds of behaviors that exploit consumers, like price gouging during natural disasters. But I was skeptical. If it's so clearly illegal, why has nothing happened about this?
Regulators and attorneys general have grown complacent. They've gotten used to the high prices in stadiums just like we have. I think it's just a lack of imagination, a lack of will. Corporate America has realized that they can overcharge because enforcers aren't going to stop them.
It's not just lawsuits. State agencies across the country.
So you don't think they're doing this with auto parts and with fast food and with processed food and with organic food and anything that any corporation touches? It's not just with hot dogs. And billionaires are really greedy. I mean, no way.
Could write rules explicitly banning price gouging at the concession stand under these unfair practice laws. But there's an even more direct solution. Those terrible public-private partnerships that owners love to exploit. When I was reviewing Madison Square Garden's own financial reports, something caught my eye. This line, under a section called Economic and Operational Risk. The report highlights the danger of the government pulling their special zoning permits. They have to get renewed every 5 or 10 years. And their $43 million a year tax exemption. Now, wouldn't it be a shame if the city asked for something in return? Or any other city for that matter. We seem to be one of the few countries, in fact, that finds sports price gouging acceptable. In 2016, 10,000 Liverpool fans walked out of a match to protest 77-pound tickets. They chanted, "Enough is enough! You greedy bastards! Enough is enough!" to the team's American owners. In 2025, according to The Athletic, the most expensive ticket is 61 pounds, about $80 US. My Knicks ticket alone cost $277. That's about the same as the average cost of an NFL ticket. Meanwhile, many teams in the UK don't use dynamic pricing, they use fixed prices by seat, something New York's Mayor Zohran Mamdani has proposed doing for the World Cup, where a finals ticket goes for $16,000 or more. And in the UK, scalping is highly restricted. Others are picking up the Ron Gordon price-fighting torch. Lena Khan, the former FTC commissioner and current advisor to Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah, she's had an interesting career, right? FTC advisor when she was like 15, and now she's, 22? And now she's oh my gosh, come on.
Promised to use New York City's unconscionable pricing laws to go after outrageous.
So our Indian FTC person is now working for the Indian mayor of New York.
Just concessions. Whether it's taxpayer dollars, use of public lands, or just enforcement of existing laws, most American localities have leverage.
We should expect cities to demand conditions.
And they have people running around on the internet right now saying that Zohran Mamdani, or whatever the hell his name is actually Jeffrey Epstein's son, which is fantastic.
One of them that they can be putting into all of these contracts is street pricing.
A hot dog at that cart is $5. Now, you go inside and a hot dog is $9.50.
Street pricing is the idea that the price of a hot dog inside needs to be the same as the price of a hot dog outside, which is the polar opposite of whatever Madison Square Garden is doing. As the Groundwork Collaborative reports, street pricing with no markup has been implemented in Portland's International Airport, and a few stadiums are already bucking the price gouging trend, and they're not going out of business anytime soon. The point is, we have the power to stop price gouging, even if our elected leaders pretend we can't or won't. That's what the Parks Board tried with Ron to shoo him away.
But it really feels like instead of walking out of the stadium, we should enforce or use the government to do it. Like, instead of just, I don't know. I don't know if this feels good to me. Anyway.
But sometimes officials just need a little public pressure or one dogged pursuer of justice.
They brush you off. What makes you want to keep going?
Because I was right. They're doing something wrong. And if nobody's going to help you, that then redouble your efforts and do some more.
When the Parks Board didn't take him seriously, Ron went to the press. He took it national. He wrote and called anyone and
do you want some Marxism with that hot dog?
everyone. He got a letter from the White House, and economist Milton Friedman told Ron to spend his time more fruitfully. But besides the rebuke from a Nobel-winning economist, the pestering worked.
Sports Illustrated covered it a couple times. The Wall Street Journal did it. Sport Magazine, CBS National News.
You sound like you're about to say, give me liberty or give me debt.
Well, it's automatic. Give me fairness and give me my nickel.
Ron's one-man crusade finally moved the Parks Board.
You wouldn't blame Californian Ron Gordon for shouting hot dog. This week, San Francisco's Park and Recreation Board ruled that Gordon was right and they were wrong.
But he was one man fighting against one nickel in an unending march of rising prices. 47 years later, my total bill at Madison Square Garden was $638.53.
What did you
$555.60 was 2 tickets. Those were the cheap seats. And the other $87.93 was food. For that much money, I could have gotten 2 round-trip tickets to Spain, where you can get a beer at a game for under $5.
You might be thinking, what's the harm in a $15 beer? It's not an essential good. It's not, your monthly bills. But we all deserve to live in an economy where you're not just scraping by, that you actually have a chance to have joy and be entertained and go to a sports game. We can live in that world. We used to live in that world.
Ron tried to keep that world alive, just a little bit longer. But he did so at a huge personal cost, mostly phone bills.
I spent over $3,000 fighting them on hot dog prices.
Do you know what that is adjusted for inflation? Because I've done the math.
No, I'm not going to give a refund to my wife.
It's $14,000.
Ooh.
How does that make you feel?
Broke, poor, but it was an investment in justice.
Ron hasn't been to a game in about 30 years. Even back then, the big money pouring into sports didn't sit right with him.
The heroes are in the stands. I mean, the heroes in society. So I got tired of it. And yes, it did leave a bad taste in my mouth.
You told a reporter.
The more I knew about it and the less other people did about it, the more it became my responsibility.
Do you remember saying that?
No, but good for me. That's the truth. And once you know that much, don't quit. To go make a difference for other people is important. I mean, I taught high school for 38 years.
I mean, one thing that would be interesting to me is if the fans walked out, I would think it would be pretty easy to get the players to be in solidarity with that, especially if the fans are just walking out because, it shouldn't be, maybe if there's some $2,000 seats right next to the, but I don't know. I think that that's what's got to happen. And it won't happen, of course, but that's what should happen.
Hopeful of making it a better world.
If you work in the food industry or sports, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at stories@perfectunion.us. Thanks for watching.
Anyway, I don't know if they're worth watching, but they're worth watching to see what working assumptions are being imposed on their viewers.
I don't care what you
What working assumptions are being imposed on their viewers? That's the question you want to ask.
What time is it? Game time!
Go quickly now, bang. No? Oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry, right here. All right. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gigaohm Biological. I'm going to disappear for a second here. Welcome. It's Monday. I hope you're still staying focused. I hope you had a good weekend. There's been a lot of interruptions on the internet for my weekend, but that's okay. Just make sure that you're making the move to get off of social media slowly if you have to, but as quickly as possible. Autism spectrum disorder, sorry Brian, autism spectrum disorder is a myth used to make sure that intramuscular injection is never questioned as a methodology, virology is never questioned as a science, and public health is never questioned as a reason. The same thing can be said, of course, for pandemics and gain of function. They have done the same trick with these, and I think we're starting to really be able to push through that now. Because these people have exposed themselves. Those aren't really well aligned there. I apologize for that. Oh, the is there again. This is that silly silly slide. Darn it. It's going to be there again. Yes, an extra the. I went back too far in my decks. Mark, for example, will not be happy. He has made a whole new set of slides moving in the background, and this is a very old one there. You can go to his website and see the collection of, I don't know how many thousand thumbnails he's got going there. I am trying to get some momentum here, but quite frankly, I still find it very difficult during basketball season to find the way, and December was an absolute disaster. It was a disaster because I almost didn't make it to the gym once, and that has really set me back, but I am happy to report that I'm getting back to where I was. I'm starting to feel a little better again. And I am staying focused on the biology, not taking the bait on social media and loving my neighbors, and that might be part of the reason why I'm not on as often. But we're going to change that in February. If you're not aware of whose voice you're hearing, my name's JJCouey. You can find the stain of my academic work on the National Library of Medicine's website, PubMed. I've also got a couple websites, a couple YouTube channels that you can look up and subscribe to. I might be live on the YouTube channel now. I might not be. I don't know. I don't really care. How it works is that I've got a few members that financially support the stream and a few more viewers that are consistently sharing the work every week. And that is what makes other people find the biology. And when they find the biology, then more people are free all the time. Where is my Beat Boys BB? What in the world? There it is. Why aren't you up here? That's weird. That was weird. Sorry about that. I've been mixing all kinds of different things together because I got tired of using. I was using a clip. A whole song from the soundtrack of Book of Eli. If you weren't aware of what I was doing there, for a while I was using this tune from the soundtrack of Book of Eli, and that's a pretty cool movie. If you haven't seen it, it's actually a really good movie. Yeah. I wanted to get something else going there, and I found the soundtracks of Dune and the second Dune. It's not that I hadn't used that before. I have used that before, but I went back and found that, and if you haven't seen the beginning of this stream, you can scroll it back later and check it out. I think it's kind of moving. I'm going to transition to this background and then come over here. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. It's actually, 3:28 p.m., the 2nd of February, 2026, coming to you live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is Gigaohm Biological. It's kind of the second half of the show. I don't know. We're going to try and push forward more and more with trying to fade away the music. We're going to try and take a look at contemporary news in America and try to see if we can decipher it or maybe filter it in such a way so that it can be useful in terms of trying to see what, again, working assumptions are being imposed on the viewers. Because with incorrect working assumptions, you essentially are unable to interpret reality. Reality becomes unavailable. And so more and more, I think we're going to have to teach our children how to think actively in terms of working assumptions. And when they talk to an adult, what are the working assumptions under which this adult is operating? What are the working assumptions that are both of these podcast actors are operating under? These are really powerful questions to ask. And once you start asking that by default, man, oh man, some of this stuff just becomes very, very exciting. It becomes exciting because you can see how they've done it. And in retrospect, you can go back and look at some of the ways that these actors were behaving during the pandemic. And it is striking, ladies and gentlemen. It is striking. So I'm excited to share that with you and the things that I've archived. And I have been archiving, screenshotting saving things for years. And I will confess to you, sometimes I go years without looking. And in fact, I have gone for more than 2 years without really looking in a couple of these folders. And then last week, after my show that I did, the last show that I did, I looked in that folder and I just got lost. I got lost in memories. I got surprised by things that were now technically 3 or even 4 years old. And knowing the first 2 years of this were a struggle in and of themselves, that was, everything that preceded me getting involved with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a whole nother world of the same kind of cloak and dagger nonsense, but with a whole nother group of people. And so for me, it just becomes so important to constantly revisit this history, to be sure that I am documenting it well enough so that the book turns out right and that the details are there to make it entertaining enough to read, but also so that the details are there to make it as compelling as it is to me. Sometimes I'm just not able to express the amount of certainty that I have because of the collective, all these experiences that pop up in my head from the last 6 years that all directly line up with the idea that it's just one big cast on one script on a need-to-know basis, and they're all varying levels of improvisational skill and also, just ranking them in terms of how their role in this. It's just remarkable to me now how much progress I've made and how much easier it has been made me for writing. And for putting things down on paper, which is finally something that, I don't know. I really feel like I'm now making progress with understanding how to get this message on a piece of paper, both the biology of it, which is actually the fun part, but also this stuff, the dirty, this is filthy. This is the part that really leaves a stain, and leaves a kind of taint on my spirit or my soul when I do it too often or too long. And so that's what I'm trying to express with that, music video in the beginning with the Dune soundtrack, there is something remarkable that has happened over the last 6 years. And unfortunately for me, I've had like a courtside seat that I didn't want. And I do really believe that the earth was tricked into believing that the USA chose Trump twice. I do believe that the earth is being tricked into believing that the United States is nothing more than a hollowed out shell of bullshit and a very shallow and culture that is almost devoid of meaning anymore. They want that around the world so that Americans also start to think that about themselves, start to misconstrue their role and their ancestors' role in history, and more importantly, misconstrue who they are as Americans, and allow themselves to be bamboozled into playing these purebred games of race and color, which are really purebred games. They are a joke. If you're really honest and understand that you are a mudblood American and a mudblood human, and if your phenotype like mine seems to scream something in particular to some people, it doesn't mean that they're right. And in fact, I know what my ancestry is, and my ancestry could never be figured out by anybody that didn't know it already, that wasn't already told it. Simply because the assumptions that would be made upon seeing me, upon hearing me, upon talking with me, the assumptions would always be wrong. Because a mudblood American is a mudblood American. The assumptions that somebody would make after they sat with Mark Kulak for 2 hours at a bar would be horribly wrong. And so, welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is Real America. This is, I think, the real resistance in America. We are trying to bring some light to the idea that there is an explanation for what happened during the COVID pandemic, why they did it, The motivation was the management of the population pyramid. The motivation was the controlled demolition of America and the usefulness of that, the stage that it provided so that the rest of the world would also be convinced to go along with it. I'm not saying that this was limited to America. I'm saying America played a central role. And because America had such a problem in need of management, according to the overclass, then it was ripe for being used, just like certain regions or populations in the UK were ripe for being used. And in fact, they were used to create the illusion of a pandemic. And there were national security actors that were put in place and scripted in order for this to occur, so that no useful resistance to the PCR becoming a gold standard diagnostic around the world would never be mounted. No resistance at all. No resistance to the acceptance of the idea of a pandemic in the first place, and no real resistance to the destruction of these fiat currencies. And social media is the trap that we were led right into. We were told to stay home. We were told to shelter in place. And we were told that censorship was occurring, so you better get over to Getter or, open a Locals account. Or maybe you should get into this Telegram group and try Signal, because that's also really convenient. And these infiltrators, these actors, were militarized. These social media applications were militarized. It's not an algorithm. It is simply programming people to be visible or programming people not to be visible. The only way out for you and your children is to delete the apps. You can't have TikTok on your phone and only use it for half an hour every day. You can't have Snapchat on there, Instagram. It's all dumb. It's all terrible. Unless you can find a way so that you're scrolling only through people that you want to see and know, then you can't do it. It's just that simple. I think Soapbox is an attempt. You could open your own Soapbox and invite people and permit people to use that Soapbox, and then you would have exactly what you want. Invite your family and friends. People do that with Discord. Kids do that with Discord. They pay $15 a month or whatever, and maybe it's a year, I don't know, and then they have a little Discord and they're able to admit friends and moderate it. And that's probably a better way for people to have social media that allows them to communicate privately and cleverly, share pictures and that kind of thing, but without the distraction of random individuals. This is what a national security theater looks like. It keeps you running. It keeps you running. More evidence, more and more and more evidence. And this is, of course, what a national security theater sounds like. All of these people talking about natural immunity, talking about, informed consent and this kind of thing. These are all peripheral ideas to the fundamental, truths. If you think that they're screwing you at the ballpark, then the next logical thing is, where are they screwing us worse than this? If you think that they will lie about X, Y, and Z, then that's the part about it that I'm most excited about, is I think, explaining it to my sons is also easier now, and it's a little bit more hopeful because it really is that simple. We just have to have a longer time horizon in our planning and in our thinking. And we have to expect the same from the people that we elect. And I don't think the answer is to not vote. I do think the answer is to, and by large, we need to take back our local governments to better assure that maybe some semblance of a voting thing is occurring. I don't know if it's possible. Honestly, I don't. But I do know this: biology is the way that you can dispel all of this mythology for what it is. And that's the part that gets me the most fired up, because if I'm right about what I'm putting on this screen right now, then that means that many other things are not what they seem. If they're lying about hard science, and specifically hard biology, then what they lie about behind closed doors and behind separate curtains is inestimable. And I assure you, we are not stumbling on something that is trivial. This is a real turning point in at least everybody that gets this message. It's a real turning point in our collective lives because we can do this. It is actually this simple. Autism spectrum disorder is a myth that they created. When I was a child, we had children that were called retarded. You weren't supposed to call them retarded to their face, but lots of people said the retarded kids. The retarded kids rode the short bus. It was a nickname that Michael Jordan gave to one of his teammates who couldn't learn the offense. Short bus. Retarded kids, retarded development, retarded intellectual development, retarded social development, retarded physical development, retarded kids. Autism spectrum disorder is a myth because it includes too much. Autism spectrum disorder is a myth because it doesn't have any specificity. And there is no way to justify this kind of umbrella term in modern biology other than the sheer will to not disambiguate. The only reason why you would use a term like that is that you have no intention of disambiguating the subparts of it. It's just no other reason to use a term like that. There's no other reason to use a term gender spectrum if you have no intention of talking about the finer points of the spectrum. There's no point in using it. There's no point in using the autism spectrum disorder as a term if you're not going to try as accurately as possible to describe that spectrum. It makes no sense. The electromagnetic spectrum is broken up into all kinds of different energy waveform types, and they manifest in all different ways, and we have spent decades characterizing the electromagnetic spectrum. And there is no way that something can be called a spectrum but not characterized in its finest details. It doesn't deserve the name then. And that's the beautiful enchantment there. It is a semantic war that we are, a semantic trap rather, that we are in. And every time we use their words, we are already trapped. That's why autism spectrum disorder is a myth. That's why Brian Hooker didn't use the word autism in 2013 before he was recruited into this mess. Gain of function is a myth. It is a myth that all of these government agents and non-GMO, NGO people and all these other people they talk about as if they know because they've read it somewhere and they heard someone else say it and they read it in another book. And that makes it real. I've got a whole bookshelf here of books that say gain of function is real, so it must be real. None of them have any even rudimentary understanding of why they think it might be real or is real. They're sure it is real because they've read it in a few books. They've heard a few people talk about it. They've read it in a New York Times article. They've even heard Francis Collins say gain of function, so it must be real. Just like there were multiple shooters in Butler, PA, and Donald Trump really got shot in his ear for real because I heard people say it. Everybody says it. They agree on it. The working assumptions of most podcasts that approach that subject assume that he was shot in the ear. It's a question of how and when and how lucky that was and yada, yada, yada. Wild RNA pandemics are a myth. An RNA molecule cannot do that. It doesn't matter what particular sequence it has. An RNA molecule cannot do that. I am sure of it. I am sure of it. Intramuscular injection is just dumb. I have books that prove it. I have books that prove that at some point in time, hypodermic injection was taught as wrong intramuscularly. You were to avoid intramuscular injection. That was not the methodology, and there are books that say that. So it's somewhere between like 1900 and, I don't know, 1940 that we started to just kind of inject things into the muscle and not care and equate it to, I guess, injecting anywhere else, even though the whole thing is named hypodermic injection under the skin. Oops. DNA is not proof of evolution. It doesn't mean that DNA doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that I'm saying DNA doesn't code for RNA, that doesn't code for proteins. That's not what I'm saying. DNA's existence does not prove that we are descended from bacteria. And yet that is how Biology 101 is taught, that DNA proves that we descend from bacteria. That's not what it proves at all. And you've got to be very, very careful, because even Darwin didn't say that. And so Darwin never implied that his idea would take it all the way back. And we are teaching our children, like it or not, high school biology teachers are teaching children that DNA proves that we came from bacteria, from single-celled organisms to chess masters. Podcasters are not real people. That's very, very important. And life is a pattern integrity. Of course, that's the book I'm writing. And I hope Buckminster Fuller will be proud of it. I got to skip out of that one for a second and do the current slide again. I think in America, we have a couple key actors that you can use their histories to understand that this was nothing more than an elaborate hoax, an elaborate scam on America, a sabotaging of conservative America by actors who actually originate in the UK. And then after they pulled their practice scheme for voting over in the UK, they moved over to the United States, were given some property in Austin, Texas, and hooked up with Merrill Nass and Mary Holland and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Brian Hooker and Del Bigtree, and started to produce the same show, much bigger, over here in America, saving no one, making no progress, always health freedom and against mandates, just like they are right now, 2010 to 2026, no progress. And
you can tell if someone's lying.
I think Suzanne Humphreys and Polly Tommy are the best examples of people that just should not be where they are for as long as they've been without having made any progress. It's just absurd. Suzanne Humphreys apparently has like 3 books. And Polly Tommy, I think, oversees at least 2 different two different film companies and 2 different nonprofits, which is pretty impressive work. And so, yes, I think all of these things are definitely true, and that means that all of those people in the background are scripted to pretend they're not. More importantly, those people in the background are scripted to pretend that evolution is real because of DNA. They are scripted to believe that Israel or terrorists trained by Israel did 9/11. They are trained to assume that nuclear war is a possibility. I'm not saying nukes are real or nukes are not real, but at some point in time, all world leaders could have just come to the grim understanding that any real nuclear weapon deployment would kind of negate the value of the real estate of the target for quite some time. And that wouldn't really, like, how does that really help? Like, when was the last time you just destroyed something and didn't want to, I don't know, move in and, have a master plan on how to rebuild it like they do in Gaza? And so nukes don't really make sense, even if they're real, which I'm not absolutely sure because, I'm not a physicist. Nuclear war doesn't seem like a real possibility. Free-range RNA is worse than a nuke. They're all convinced of that, which makes both of them seem even more retarded. Vaccinology is the study of vaccines. Of course, that is the slave speak, and using their words and their concepts will inevitably leave you trapped. Podcasters are the new free media. Of course, we know that that's ridiculous. That's the opposite, right? Podcasters are the new cable TV, censorship prevents truth from escaping, even though everybody hears about everybody who gets censored. And so censorship was actually a very fun way to promote people, both during the pandemic and now. Artificial intelligence is a real danger. All these people believe that. And they also believe that America voted for Trump twice, which I don't think we did. And if we did, we were tricked into believing it somehow. I think the truth is a lot more complicated than you think. And most of these people on this screen are lying for a living. I know because of the experience of writing this book, and then the experience of trying to change the minds of all of the people on this screen, and none of them respond to reasoning. None of them respond to the elevator pitch of intramuscular injection just being kind of dumb, and RNA not being able to pandemic, transfection being an old technology that would have been a crime in healthy humans, population pyramids being an interesting way to display relevant data to the pandemic, and podcasters not being real. These are things that they can't discuss, and I'm not really sure why. So as I said, I want to look at some news with you. And in order to shock your brain a little bit into reminding you of how much you've seen in the last 4 days, I'm going to play the PBS NewsHour from Thursday last week. If you're not a regular PBS NewsHour viewer, you might be unaware that the most interesting PBS NewsHour program to watch is always Thursday. I think it's because Thursday is the least watched day. They put the most interesting stories on Thursday. So enjoy.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The Trump administration's top immigration enforcement official says massive changes are coming to Minnesota, including plans to eventually
pull out some of the thousands of federal agents currently deployed there.
And despite the administration's plan to ease some of the tensions, state and local officials and even the courts are demanding bigger changes. After weeks of tension, protests, and clashes in the Twin Cities, and the shooting deaths of 2 U.S. citizens by federal immigration agents, Tom Homan, President Trump's border czar today, said he's working on a possible drawdown plan in Minnesota, and he acknowledged missteps.
Yes. I said it, draw down the number of people here. Nothing's ever perfect, and anything can be improved on. And what we've been working on is making this operation safer, more efficient, by the book.
But Homan added any reduction in the roughly 3,000 federal officers in Minnesota would only come with cooperation from state officials, which Homan acknowledged was occurring. And he said there would be zero tolerance for protesters who assault or interfere with officers.
We are not surrendering the president's mission in immigration enforcement. Let's make that clear. As we see that cooperation happen, then the redeployment will happen.
It comes as new video surfaced of Alex Preddy, one of the 2 U.S. citizens killed in Minneapolis by federal agents. In the video taken 11 days before Preddy was shot and killed, he's seen kicking the taillight off a federal vehicle before agents tackle him to the ground. President Trump reposted the video on social media last night. But in a meeting with his cabinet today,
Mr. President, why not take questions?
The president refused to discuss Minnesota entirely, took no questions, and notably did not call on Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to speak.
I think all of these people, of course, are actors put in place to aggravate, and that's why they're also on South Park. I think an interesting question to ask here is what Palantir is doing in Minnesota to assist or to direct the activities of ICE, and how devices are being tracked, and how that, whole deployment of whatever software and hardware is being used to do that. I think that's primarily what's going on. Besides, of course, what this also does is it gets a read or a barometric reading on people's responses and how engaged they are. So if you were to look at my social media right now, and look specifically on Twitter, which is the only one that I'm really on X, you'll just see the same pattern of me pointing out that these people are working together and they're frauds and they lie about murder. And it's really all focused on the fake health freedom movement. I don't care about Epstein. I don't care about Candace Owens. I don't care about any of that stuff. I only care about the fact that Candace Owens retweets Peter McCullough about, 2 shooters in Bethel Park, PA, because that reveals something about the narrative and shows you clearly how the cast works together to make it seem like all spontaneous activity when it's really not. And so this is also driving that. It's driving another, a dipstick. If you think about a dipstick and measuring the oil in a car, it's just getting a dipstick reading on everybody. And how vulnerable are you to this? Are you actually showing up? Did your phone show up in Minnesota? Think about the long list of people that have traveled to Minnesota that don't live there, that are now on a list. All of the people who are making posts or, whatever, they're all on lists, just like I was probably on a list at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. And those people that get put on a list, the ones that meet the criteria probably have, paid actors come and interact with them and make sure that their activity is directed in a way that's useful for this theater. That's how it works.
That says some Republican lawmakers have called for ICE to refocus on its core mission. Ohio Senator John Husted.
It's time to reset and focus on what the mission is, which was to target violent criminals, people who are, on the worst of the worst list.
Meantime, from one state drawdown to another. Republican Senator Susan Collins said today that enhanced immigration operations in her state of Maine have ended. That's after ICE today revealed its enforcement surge there culminated in more than 200 arrests. In a statement, Collins said she urged Secretary Noem to get ICE to reconsider its approach to immigration enforcement in the state. The courts have also demanded reforms from ICE. The federal chief judge in Minnesota condemned immigration agents and officials there for violating nearly 100 court orders this month alone. Another federal judge ordered the Trump administration to stop detaining and deporting Minnesotan refugees who were lawfully admitted to the U.S. Speaking to fellow mayors in Washington, D.C. today, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey held firm that the only reduction in federal agents that he will accept is a total reduction.
We've been very clear. The Operation Metro Surge needs to end. This kind of conduct and siege needs to stop, not just in Minneapolis. It needs to stop nationwide.
Back in the Twin Cities, a vigil for Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse mourned by colleagues, neighbors, and fellow medical professionals. Solemn calls for justice in a city still very much on edge. For more on the legal and constitutional questions surrounding the unrest in Minnesota, we're joined now by Paul Butler, a former federal prosecutor who now teaches criminal law at Georgetown University's Law Center. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be with you.
We heard President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, say that federal officials could start drawing down operations in Minnesota so long as the state and local governments comply with the federal enforcement. Are Minnesota officials actually legally obligated to comply with the federal government when it comes to immigration enforcement?
They're not legally required by the Constitution, but Minnesota state law requires the state prison to release inmates who are subject to deportation to ICE after they've served their sentence. So last year, about 84 inmates went from state prison in Minnesota to ICE custody.
When we hear Tom Homan talk about targeted enforcement, what does that actually mean?
It means, he says, going after people who are undocumented and threats to national security or public safety. If Homan follows through, that could be a game changer from what the administration's strategy now is, which is mass deportations. There's no way that you can deport or detain 3,000 people a day without bad optics. It inevitably involves racial profiling, brief detentions of people who are legally in this country to ascertain that they're citizens. So targeted enforcement, it's not flashy, and there'll be a lot fewer people detained. The statistics suggest that people who are undocumented are actually less likely to commit violent crime than people who are here in this country legally. So you wouldn't have the big numbers, but arguably there'd be more of a benefit to public safety than just randomly rounding up people on the streets.
We've also seen protesters and legal observers say that they've been swept up in these enforcement actions. What legal protections do people observing these enforcement actions, do journalists, do bystanders have in these situations?
So there's two parts of the Constitution that are relevant. People have a Fourth Amendment right to be free of unreasonable searches and seizures. The ACLU has a lawsuit in which it says a number of protesters and observers have been illegally detained. They haven't committed any crime, but they've still been swept up in this enforcement effort. And there's also a First Amendment right that everybody has to protest. You can't impede law enforcement, but you can be annoying. You can yell and curse at officers. You can blow whistles at them. You just can't obstruct them from carrying out their law enforcement responsibilities.
My guess is that this guy used to stutter or something because he's speaking in a very trained way. My guess is that he once spoke very much worse than that, but he is a little slow.
Federal agencies, including ICE and Border Patrol, there are reports that those agencies are using the same intrusive technologies, whether it's biometric technology, facial recognition technology, to not only track undocumented immigrants, but increasingly to track citizens opposed to the government's actions. What legal questions does that raise?
So it raises questions about whether the government is using new technology in ways to circumvent the warrant requirement or the law that says that people can't be detained unless the government has reasonable suspicion. So what ICE and Customs is doing is using, say, facial recognition techniques to identify protesters and possibly to identify people who are in the country without documents. Now, if they're in public, they don't have any right not to have their identity known, but there are always concerns about if it's protesters, people.
It's almost like they're telling you right now that they're doing it. They have probably high definition cameras in a lot of those cars, and they feed that back into the big computer at Palantir, and then Palantir screens all the faces. I'm absolutely sure that that's going on. They may have even already knew that Alex Preddy was Alex Preddy before they pulled up because they had his phone on the low jack or whatever.
Who are acting legally, but why the government is doing this. And there have been reports that ICE agents have identified protesters and then in some instances driven their vehicles to their homes and just kind of announced their presence, not necessarily gone in the house. Some protesters have understandably found that intimidating.
At the moment, are the courts the only backstop, the only guardrail to prevent the abuse of power or the unconstitutional actions by the federal government, especially in places like Minneapolis and in blue cities and blue states?
So there are concerns about accountability, about when federal agents cross the line, if there will be consequences. There are also concerns about the ways that the federal officers are implementing immigration enforcement in Minneapolis. They're often wearing masks, they don't identify themselves, and many of them don't use body cams. So Congress could pass a law requiring masks, requiring identification in most instances, and also requiring body cams. That would go a long way in terms of assuring people in Minnesota that the law enforcement officers are acting in a responsible way. And if they're not, then they can be identified so that there could be consequences either within ICE or in some instances, if they cross a line, criminal consequences.
Paul Butler, thanks as always for your insights.
Always a pleasure.
remember this is Thursday, so
In the day's other headlines, national weather officials are warning of dangerously cold.
Ilhan, whatever her name is, hasn't been squirted yet. And so, you know, that whole bullshit thing didn't start. And also the Epstein release hasn't happened, so nobody's losing their mind about that. And that's good because it's all nonsense.
Cold temperatures across large parts of the eastern U.S. heading into the weekend. Winter advisories were in effect today for areas stretching from Texas to Maine. Some states in the South Atlantic could see more heavy snow starting tomorrow. In the meantime, emergency crews have been working to repair icy power lines in Mississippi. In one case, even using a helicopter to access those lines. The state also dispatched the National Guard to help clear the roads 5 days after a massive storm. While in Nashville, more than 100 people lined up outside this church to stock up on food items. The death toll from the frigid weather has now risen to at least 85 people. President Trump says he asked Russian President Vladimir Putin not to strike Ukraine's capital for a week due to the frigid weather there. Ukraine has been experiencing one of the coldest winters in years, and Russian strikes have repeatedly knocked out heating for thousands. Speaking during his first cabinet meeting of the new year, President Trump said Putin agreed, though the Kremlin has not confirmed that.
And I have to tell you, it was very nice. A lot of people said, don't waste the call, you're not going to get that. And he did it, and we're very happy that they did it.
That's correct.
Because on top of everything else, that's not what they need is missiles coming into their towns and cities. So
the president also said he's ordered Venezuela's airspace to reopen to commercial traffic, saying that Americans will soon be able to visit. Venezuela's government has not yet commented. Soon after the announcement, American Airlines said it would aim to restart service in the coming months. The carrier was the largest U.S. airline in Venezuela before flights were suspended in 2019. Meanwhile, in Venezuela today, lawmakers approved the opening of the nation's oil sector to privatization. The National Assembly's decision would ease state control and reverse a key principle of the country's socialist movement that's ruled Venezuela for over 2 decades. It also comes after President Trump said the U.S. would take control of Venezuela's oil exports, with plans to revitalize the industry by attracting foreign investment. The European Union has listed Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization following Tehran's violent crackdown on protests that left thousands dead. This puts the EU in line with the U.S. and Canada, which have already designated the group as such. Iran's foreign ministry slammed the designation as, quote, illegal and unjustified. The 27-nation bloc also sanctioned 21 Iranian officials and organizations today. The EU's foreign policy chief said, quote, repression cannot go unanswered.
The means that were taken by the regime are really severe. So that's why we are also sending a clear message that if you are suppressing people, it has a price.
Activists say Tehran's crackdown on protesters has killed more than 6,400 people. Also today, Iranian state media is reporting that the country will carry out live-fire shooting drills in the Strait of Hormuz next week. That could disrupt traffic in the waterway, where about 20% of the world's oil passes through. In Illinois, a former sheriff's deputy was sentenced to 20 years in prison today for fatally shooting Sonia Massey, a black woman who called 911 for help. 31-year-old Sean Grayson, who is white, apologized during the sentencing, saying, quote, I made terrible decisions that night. I'm sorry. Grayson and another deputy responded to Massey's home in July of 2024 after she reported a possible intruder. Grayson shot Massey as she held a pot of boiling water. The killing prompted protests over systemic racism during police encounters. Gymnast Jordan Chiles is one step closer to potentially reclaiming a disputed bronze medal from the 2024.
I didn't think that this was so much longer. There's something coming at the end that's extremely
Court of
interesting.
Arbitration for Sport to examine new evidence.
Sorry about
Chiles's
that.
Third-place finish on floor exercise was hastily overturned after Romania claimed the Americans didn't file a score challenge in time by a matter of seconds. Today's ruling cited audio-visual recordings of the final, which could change the outcome, though it's expected to take at least a year before a verdict is ready. The U.S. trade deficit widened by the most in more than 3 decades in November. That's according to data out today, which was delayed by the government shutdown. The latest figures represent a sharp pivot from prior months when the deficit had shrunk amid President Trump's tariffs. Economists say the data also points to ongoing volatility in global trade. In the meantime, on Wall Street today, stocks ended mixed after a dramatic day of ups and downs. The Dow Jones Industrial Average managed a slight gain of around 55 points. The Nasdaq lost more than 170 points. The S&P 500 ended a touch lower on the day. 25 classic movies are entering the National Film Registry at the Library of Congress.
Doing good. Good to see you, baby.
14 and
Washington
passes this deal tonight. Democrats
legislation from
It's been done. This dysfunction is 96.7
today about the possibility. Well, for a Republican perspective on all of this, I spoke earlier with Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin before the latest announcement of a deal. Senator Ron Johnson, welcome back to the NewsHour.
Thanks for having me on.
President Trump sounded positive today about the possibility of avoiding a government shutdown, saying that he's engaged in talks with Democrats. You were among the Republicans who joined with Democrats in voting to block the funding legislation from advancing. Why?
Well, I'm just basically thoroughly disgusted with the process. I've been here 15 years. We should have passed in that time frame 180 appropriation bills on time before the start of the fiscal year in which they were funding. We've passed 6.
To avoid the registry.
It's really hard for me to take him seriously. I'm not going to listen.
Did not call.
They're having their vehicles rammed by these throw on. Well, I'm just basically thoroughly disgusted with the process. I've been here 15 years. We should have passed in that time frame 180 appropriation bills on time before the start of the fiscal year in which they were funding. We've passed 6. That's a 96.7% failure rate. To address that, I proposed, and we voted on the Eliminate Shutdown Act. We get rid of this dysfunction for all time. Pretty simple bill, just rolling 14-day automatic appropriations till the appropriators can come to agreement to pass appropriation bills. Short of that, the Shutdown Fairness Act. Let's at least pay these people. We're going to do it after the fact. Let's pay them on time. Neither bill has been passed yet. Throw on top of that, this package, in order to get it passed, includes $14.3 billion worth of earmarks. I'm part of the Republican Senate Conference. We have a resolution against earmarks. We're in charge. We've got the chairmanship of the committee, and we're going to allow $14.3 billion of earmarks when we're approaching $39 trillion in debt. So by and large, I'm just disgusted by the process. Other people can pass it. I'm not going to participate.
Why isn't there a greater will on Capitol Hill to avoid governing by brinksmanship?
Because this is the way it's been done. This dysfunction is accepted. The uniparty appropriators like the fact they have these government shutdowns to create leverage for their passing of bills that we can't afford.
I hear a guy who's not going to run for re-election. I hear a guy who's frustrated, who doesn't want to be where he is, and I know who he is. He is a scripted traitor to our grandchildren. I know it's not fun for me to say that. But this man called me in April of 2022, a half an hour after Robert F. Kennedy Jr. called me. They both told me the same story, that Robert Malone sat them down and made them watch my stream with Charles Rixey, and that they wanted my help. They all lied to me. Since 2022, they have been lying to me and about me. All of them. And this guy is part of it, because I was also presenting to his staff with Jessica Hockett in 2023. Meaningless, time wasting. All the while, the national security narrative was never going to change, and he was going to put Robert Malone and Robert Malone's approved guests in front of every Senate committee that he ever called about the pandemic. And that's what he did. Maybe he's, gotten much more than he bargained for out of this Maha movement, but he is a fraud. I don't want him to be a fraud. I don't want the fraud to be from Wisconsin. I don't want the fraud to have called me. But the way the world is right now, the hand that I'm dealt, this fraud called me. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. called me. CHD hired me and fired me. CHD and Skyhorse Publishing hired me and fired me. This book is a fraud. They wanted me to be the expert on the lab leak, and in helping them write this book, I realized that the lab leak idea was biologically impossible and dumb. And in fact, the writing of this book was going to reinforce that myth. And I thought for about a week that maybe I could convince Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to change the book. And then I realized that that's not how this clown show works. And over the last 4 years, I've been trying my best to give everybody that I've ever met the benefit of the doubt. And it has backfired on me quite tremendously.
Again, we're approaching $39 trillion in debt. Now, I realize discretionary spending is only about a quarter of all spending, but earmarks are the gateway drug. When I first got here in 2011, this was a big debate between Tom Coburn and Jim Inhofe, the two senators from Oklahoma. And Senator Inhofe made some good points. You can't let all the spending decisions up to just the president. But I sided with Tom Coburn that these earmarks are literally the gateway drug that greases the skids. We were $14 trillion in debt back in 2011. Now we're approaching $39 trillion. The system is completely out of control, completely broken. Somebody's got to stand up here and point that out and just vote no every now and again.
Democrats in these talks are calling for reforms to the way that ICE operates. They're calling for the wearing of body cameras, no wearing masks, tightening the use of warrants. Are any of those things that you can support?
Well, first of all, they're trying to basically take the focus off of the root cause of the problem, which is their open border policy. The fact we flooded millions of people into this country, a significant number of murderers and rapists and gang members, members of transnational criminal organizations, drug, human, and sex traffickers. You know, they concentrate on the martyrs that they have created by encouraging their supporters to go out and obstruct justice, resulting in the tragic deaths of 2 individuals in Minnesota. So they don't want people taking a look at the real problem, which is the massive problem they caused with their open borders. They want to focus now on DHS and blame DHS, the very people that are charged with trying to clean up their enormous mess.
But even the administration is taking a different view. You had Tom Homan today. He publicly acknowledged that federal immigration enforcement in Minneapolis, in his words, hasn't been perfect and that certain improvements could and should be made to how ICE and federal agents are operating there. At the same time, there's a new Fox News poll that shows 59% of registered voters now say that ICE's deportation efforts have been too aggressive. So given that, isn't there an acknowledgement, even within the administration, that more needs to be done to balance immigration enforcement and public safety?
Well, again, I know you want to focus on the problems that we've had trying to clean up the mess. But I, for one, have a great deal of sympathy for an ICE officer. How would you like to be somebody conducting legal law enforcement activity, and you've got the lieutenant governor of the state of Minnesota managing a signal chat, so they're encouraging their protesters to surround ICE officers? They're under threat. They're being doxxed. They're having their vehicles rammed by these peaceful protesters' vehicles. So, yes, ICE officers are under hair trigger alert, which has resulted in those tragic deaths. So I've got a great deal of sympathy for the ICE officers who are being put in this position. They're trying to keep America safe. They're trying to keep Minneapolis safe, and they're being frustrated and obstructed in those efforts.
Some of your Republican colleagues, to include Senator Lisa Murkowski, Tom Tillis, they're now calling for the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to step down. The president notably did not call on her at today's cabinet meeting when he was going around the table. You said that she got over her skis in her initial comments about the shooting death of Alex Preddy. You know, drawing on your experience as the former...
I saw her get over her skis with a gun in her hand. It looked like she, muzzle swept the head of the guy next to her during the photo shoot.
Former chair of the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Do you believe that she deserves to stay in the job?
I believe that's the president's call. I'll leave it up to him.
You don't have a view on it?
I'll leave it up to the president. Again, they serve it at his pleasure, and that's his call.
Senator Ron Johnson, thanks for your time.
Have a good evening.
Trade deals around the world are being negotiated, signed, and celebrated without the U.S. Leaders are looking to other sources of economic partnership as turbulent tariff policies, harsh rhetoric, and unpredictable social media posts from President Trump push allies to the edge.
Trump's social media posts are pushing our allies to the edge because social media is so powerful that's how it works. Donald Trump puts something on Truth Social and the world responds.
Schifrin has this report.
This is not the pivot to Asia the U.S. intended. Today, the first British Prime Minister visit to Beijing in 8 years, and Keir Starmer told Chinese President Xi Jinping he wanted a lasting relationship.
I've long been clear that the UK and China need a long-term, consistent, and comprehensive strategic partnership.
The person who must not be named, President Trump only referenced in passing by a Chinese leader who presented himself as a source of stability.
Currently, the international situation is intertwined with changes and turmoil. As long as we uphold a broad historical perspective, transcend our differences, and respect each other, we will be able to deliver results that can withstand the test of history.
We have to make sure that we put up the base on the, well, I can't even get it up any higher. I guess it doesn't work like that. Hello. Yeah, we got to put up the base higher on the translator of the Chinese guy versus the guy on the, right. Anyway.
It's not the first time in history a British delegation has visited Beijing to make business deals, but it comes despite British criticisms that China is a threat to national security.
Cybersecurity, stealing intellectual property. Keir Starmer doesn't really know how to deal with China. My worry is that he's going there with a begging bowl.
But more European leaders are walking the Chinese red carpet. Earlier this week, it was Finland's Prime Minister, Petteri Orpo.
China-Finland relations have developed steadily regardless of changes in the international situation.
Those changes have pushed Europe into Asia's arms.
We did it. We delivered the mother of all deals.
This week, the European Union and India finalized a deal that represents a third of global trade.
A third of global trade deal? What? A third of global trade between the EU and India. It's so interesting, isn't it, to think about how many Indians are in charge of how many things? What I'm particularly interested in are the podcast actors who are also foreign agents that are at the head of the FDA and at the head of the NIH, because they don't belong there. They don't have the professional requisite expertise to be there, and they're not even Americans. So I don't understand how they got there by podcasting for 4 years, especially because what they podcasted about was absolute bullshit. But of course, you understand that's what they were scripted to do. That's how they got to the FDA and the NIH. They were scripted actors being run from behind by handlers like Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan and others. A carefully orchestrated national security theater. Number one, first and foremost, to make sure that PCR would never be questioned as a gold standard diagnostic in 2026, which it is not. And here is the EU and India making a trade deal worth 1/3 of all global trade. Why didn't that work? What? That should work. Doesn't work though. There, I did.
And today, Europe upgraded its ties with Vietnam, as European Council President Antonio Costa warned of changing tides.
At a moment when international rules-based order is under threat from multiple sides, we need to start to stand side by side as reliable and predictable partners.
We've helped them for so many years. We've never gotten anything.
It was only last week that President Trump proved himself unpredictable over Danish territory Greenland and disparaged the very concept of NATO's collective defense.
And all we're asking for is to get
Greenland, including right title and ownership, because you need the ownership to defend it. You can't defend it on a lease.
The European response has been visceral.
Europe is no longer Washington's primary center of gravity. The shift has been ongoing for a while. It is structural, not temporary.
This super clown is on film saying, on video, saying that she has a huge book list. And by the time she's done with this job, she'll be a pretty smart person. It's really crazy. Why is that thing always malfunctioning? I might have to get a new one.
It means that Europe must step up. No great power in history has ever outsourced its survival.
This is also controlled demolition. That's what the EU is. Just make sure you understand that. The EU is specifically to control, demolish the member states' cultures and economies. They had separate currencies, which meant that they stabilized one another, and their independence stabilized each other independently. And now they are beholden to a bureaucracy they can't control. They are beholden to a fiat currency over which they have no control. And from a military and economic and social perspective, they have no more control over their own borders even. And so the EU is being controlled, demolished, just like America is being controlled, demolished. And the illusion is being sustained that this is not happening exclusively on social media in the first world. The first world is being enslaved by social media. She's supposed to be frustratingly dumb, just like the German lady is frustratingly yucky and ugly and German.
And survived.
We are in the midst of a rupture.
This
not a
guy.
transition.
Western doubt in the U.S., most publicly expressed by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Same guy, Mark Carney, same thing, is just a clown, a performing clown, connected by family ties, raised to understand the illusion. That's it.
Welcome. Who recently made his own automotive trade deal in Beijing, despite a threat from President Trump.
Le monde a changé.
The world has changed. Washington has changed. Almost nothing is normal in the United States at the moment. That is the truth.
But Canada and Europe still rely on the U.S. for security, natural gas and oil, and the trading relationship is worth more than $5 trillion. All of which pointed out this week by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
If anyone thinks here, again, that the European Union or Europe as a whole can defend itself without the US, keep on dreaming. You can't. In that scenario, you would lose the ultimate guarantor of our freedom, which is the US nuclear umbrella.
The ultimate guarantor of freedom in Europe, according to the former Dutch Prime Minister, now NATO head, Mark Rutte, is the nuclear umbrella of the America.
Good luck.
The hard reality of Europe's present, but they're considering a more independent future, thanks to doubts sowed by President Trump. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
Well, to help us understand the implications of these shifting global relationships, I'm joined now by Chrystia Freeland, the former Deputy Prime Minister and former Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada. Chrystia, welcome back to the NewsHour. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.
So before I ask you specifically about Canada, I want to get your big picture view on those new deals.
So they're just casually letting this, family of Nazis, descendant of Nazis, trainee of the WEF, former finance minister of Canada that actually shut down the bank accounts of citizens. They're letting her on the PBS NewsHour as an authority. She is an advisor to the Ukraine right now. And Americans who simply are woefully unaware of what's being done around the world, the actors that are on stage and what they are doing with this, they just can't see it. That introduction didn't tell you that this woman was a tyrant. and a traitor to all the grandchildren of Canada? Wow.
Just reported on the EU with India and Vietnam, Britain and China. How do you see those? Are those a response to or a backlash to President Trump's tariff threats and other threats against NATO allies?
Yeah, I think in part they are. I mean, I think those deals, and I think the really important one is the EU-India deal. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, described that deal as the mother of all deals, maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but it's really, really significant. That's an agreement between two really big economies. And traditionally, it's quite hard to do a trade deal with India. I'm a former trade minister, and it takes a long time to negotiate with the Indians. They're very professional, very careful, very thorough. So the fact that they signed that deal, very, very significant. And I think it's a good thing for the world.
In terms of dealing with China here, I do want to put to you what
EU deal with India is great for the world, says Canadian trader.
what the EU's climate chief said today. He said the EU should resist China's pull on clean tech. In particular, he warned about economic coercion, also warned about potential kill switches in the technology that could threaten the EU's energy system. And I should note that Canada just signed a deal to allow thousands of Chinese electric vehicles into the country at a new lower tariff rate. So does Canada not share those same security and economic concerns?
Look, I think the China question is a really important one. And when I was finance minister, I actually put in place tariffs on Chinese cars, tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminum, matching the tariffs that the Biden administration had put in place. And we put those tariffs in place because we recognized the security challenges from China, because we recognized the need to protect our workers, Canadian manufacturing workers, from Chinese intentional oversupply. But we also did it because of our partnership with the United States, and we wanted to be a good friend and a good ally. It's hard to have those friends, though, when countries are feeling pressure from the United States, including tariffs from the United States.
So if we see this as part of a Canadian effort to pivot slightly away from the United States, then, for Canada specifically, I mean, the two economies are so integrated, right? For every 2 out of every 3 Canadian exporters, the U.S. is the sole market. So how difficult is it going to be for Canada to pivot away?
Look, I think diversification is always a good idea. Whether you are a business or a country, to rely on a single client, a single customer, is never a great idea. But what I'd also like to take the opportunity to say tonight to all of your American viewers is, we want to be your friends. I think the vast majority of Canadians would prefer a close, effective, mutually beneficial relationship with the United States, including on trade. And I know that's possible. You know, I am the person for Canada who negotiated the USMCA.
There it was right there, right? She was sitting right there with Trump in the first term, because it's a show then and it was a show now.
New NAFTA trade agreement. We negotiated that with the first Trump administration. There were a lot of bumps along the way. Tariffs were imposed on Canada at one point. We responded with dollar for dollar retaliation. But
Arthur, she didn't even bother to take a shower and fix her hair for this interview. She got out of bed, threw these clothes on, those pearls on. That black thing is probably just what she wore to bed.
At the end of the day, we got to a deal. And we got to a deal that President Trump described as the best trade deal ever.
And yet, despite the long alliance between the two countries, we saw the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney in Davos talk about us being in a time of rupture. He mentioned the old order is not coming back. Do you see what's happening now as the beginning of a new world order? And what does that look like to you?
A new world order on the PBS NewsHour. And Carnegie said it in China, and they also said it a new world order on the PBS freaking NewsHour.
I think a lot of countries, a lot of America's traditional allies are finding their current treatment to be really challenging. I was at Davos. One of the comments that struck me the most was actually from the Prime Minister of Belgium. Now, he is a conservative. He is part of the right-wing group in the EU. He is an Atlanticist. He is the kind of person who traditionally would be a great ally of the United States. And he said, being a happy vassal is one thing, being a miserable slave is something else. So when a phlegmatic Flemish Belgian prime minister is describing the way he is being treated, the way his country is being treated, as being treated like a miserable slave, I think you know that America's traditional allies are feeling ill-treated, and countries are responding.
You mentioned that U.S.-Mexico.
I really like that comment by Entropy Writer in the chat that they are malevolent players, but they are also players that are on their way out, and so they are expendable. They are suitable targets for arrows right now, and I think that's a very, very astute observation.
Canada trade agreement you helped to negotiate. That is set to be reviewed by this summer. What happens if the U.S. pulls out of that?
I think that would be devastating for the U.S. economy. And one of the things that I think we have observed over the past few weeks is when there is a strong market reaction, we see that this administration is able to course correct. When the threats about Greenland were at their peak, you did see markets reacting negatively. And shortly after that, you saw a softening of the U.S. position.
It's remarkable how much time they're giving her, isn't it? It's really remarkable. This is nothing short of a criminal, but she's somehow now working in Ukraine. It's crazy what the world has come to.
Ultimately believe that market signals, also what the administration hears from American states, from American mayors, from American legislators, from all of the Americans who sell to Canada, I think that is ultimately going to mean that we get to a deal.
That is the former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, joining us tonight. Thank you so much for your time. It's good to speak with you.
Pleasure.
I think the last part of it is not that great.
A 2-month-long expedition to...
No.
Basically, they'll be sending down instruments that measure...
He's in Antarctica.
That's coaxial cable. It can carry data. So if you have an instrument where you want to keep reading the data as it goes...
I could show this, but it's not that interesting. This guy's not even that fun of a science guy, really. Thanks for being here. I'm going to play you out with a song. I know this wasn't the best show that I've ever done, but there was an intro... and the intro was quite good. I enjoyed making that. I have 2 more Dune soundtrack oriented intros to release this week as part of my fun little 3-part Dune thingy. I don't know what I'm going to call it when I play them all together. They look just amazing though. But it's tricky to get it right. So I got this one right this morning, but the other 2 are a little trickier in terms of getting everything, the timing right and stuff, the way that I do it. But I think it'll work out all right. And I think I'll be here more often now that I've got some things straightened out about what I want to be doing and how I'm going to be doing it. I know that I'm talking in a very cryptic way a lot, but there are, if we talk about a kid's book and an adult's book, then there's like 2 books that need to be written. And so that's a lot of work, no matter which way you cut it. Getting momentum in those places is tough. I mean, I don't know what to say other than that. Try it yourself. You got 6 years of my work, and I think it's all there. It's just a question of somebody doing it, and so I'm going to try my best. I know that my family believes in me. I know that a lot of people believe in me, like Stephen and Simon and Greg and some others. And so, as long as those people keep believing in me, I'm going to keep going live and keep doing this. So sloppy show today, very relaxed show today. In the afternoon, I'm a little bit more relaxed than I am in the morning. I also took a shower before, and I don't shower a lot, and so there's a detail you didn't know. And so, yeah, it was kind of a day where I felt especially relaxed because I did take a shower today. And so I'm off to the basketball court with my boys, which is absolutely the favorite part of my life right now. So I will see you again tomorrow. And I think this is a good one. I think I used this once, I think, in one show before. right, if you're still here, I'm going to run one because I want to practice it because the timing is a little off on this one and I want to practice it once. So it'll be like a little preview for tomorrow. Don't let it spoil it. If you don't want it to be spoiled, then don't stay for it. Yeah, that'll work. I'll do this one. Here we go. Bonus footage. This is bonus footage. I just think this is awesome. I don't know why I enjoy this so much, but you know, I'm trying to make it fun. Sometimes you gotta make it fun. Now, which one do I use for this one? This one is the one with this one. Yes, that one's the one. Ooh, this one's so good.
Oh, look, JC on the bike was timed out by Risa. Oh, time out, JC on the bike. JC on the bike. It's JC on the bike. It's JC on the bike, yeah. Well, I'm wise enough to know when a chump needs banning, and I know just the one. Look at round. It's JC on the bike.
3M.
It says Veda didn't study music in
We're
college.
the three horsemen of the COVID apocalypse, according to pretty much everybody. We're doing a show. We're going to talk about all things. We're going to talk about therapeutics, boosters. We're going to talk about Omicron. I like to say it, put the accent on the wrong syllable because it sounds more like a Decepticon than ever.
And we're going to talk about why we're sitting so close together. Why do you start?
You know,
he doesn't have a third microphone.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a third microphone.
You know, my supporters fund the show, and they're cheap. They're so cheap. No,
all these resources. No
yeah.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
you guys
we're
right on
being
each other.
that close, or is this an unboosted contact?
We're unmasked, unboosted, and unrepentant, Marty. That's
Well, I'm an unboosted male. That's my preferred pronoun, by the way.
Oh, is that your pronoun? Unboosted male?
Yeah.
Yes, my pronouns are it, they, those, and currently unboosted because I got Moderna, which apparently kicks ass.
Yeah.
Like it's a good vaccine.
Yeah.
I'm 48. I don't have a lot of comorbidities. I have some clotting stuff, but I've never clotted. It's just like theoretical 23andMe. Thank you very much. So, how about you? You boosted?
You know too much about yourself. It's a HIPAA violation to ask someone if they're. No, it's not. No, it's
yeah,
not.
never mind.
No, it's not.
Never mind. You don't have to say.
Privacy is dead, my friend.
But
Privacy is dead.
But I do see that people do say that. That's not true. It's not HIPAA. You can, of course, ask anyone their status, but no, I haven't gotten my booster yet. And boosters.
You mean this week you haven't got because you do weekly boosters, I'm sure.
Well,
right?
eventually we're all going to have to keep boosting.
You know, my vaccine card looks like one of those like frequent flyer like coffee cards where they punch the hole. Like I boosted here and boosted here and boosted here, and when I get 10 boosters, Fauci sends me a Fauci bobblehead that says I am the science.
I'm getting my booster sent with the GNC nutrition vitamins.
They have the same evidence.
Yeah. What are the odds we get canceled now? The 3-time.
Oh, this
canceling
is so
incumbents.
I get yelled at for platforming each one of you separately. Now all we need to do is bring Jay Bhattacharya and Monica Gandhi here, and we'll have like the horsemen of the apocalypse.
Oh,
and Twitter will just melt. It will just turn into goo.
Nice.
Yeah. So the booster thing. What is the deal with that, Marty? I have no clue why I'm going live, which means this is either going to be amazing or a complete disaster. So I know you want to watch a complete disaster. And probably amazing is much more boring. Come on down. Let's talk about all the things. Whatever you guys want. I don't care. I'm bored. I got all this. It's like, let's chat. Let's have coffee. Come on. Come on. Come on. Where are you? Where are you? Come on in. That was aggressive. Oh my God. 0 fucks are given these days. It's kind of nice. I was just looking at like my social security statement, like how much I've paid into it, what I'm gonna get when I reach 67, or if I wait until 70, or I do it at 62, and I was like, that's not enough. That's not enough. All right, come on down. Why do I have no comments here? Maybe no one cares, or maybe I'm screwing this up. Hold on. Refresh this. There they are. See, I knew I was screwing it up. Emma, Kara, Kathleen, Dominic, Morgan, disaster. That's what this is. This is like most public policy these days, a complete disaster. Most healthcare policy. Like, dude, what is going on? The head of some CDC thing was like, yeah, polio shots, kind of optional, you know, personal autonomy. Polio! Dude, I don't know. I'm having trouble, but I also don't care. But I also care.
These guys started looking into it. And this is directly taken from the research of John Cullen and Jason Goodman, who did amazing work on this stuff. Like, we all owe them a great debt on this, because they started to look. These guys started to look into it. And this is directly taken from the research of John Cullen and Jason Goodman, who did amazing work on this stuff. Like, we all owe them a great debt on this, because they started to look. These guys started to look into it. And this is directly taken from the research of John Cullen and Jason Goodman, who did amazing work on this stuff. Like, we all owe them a great debt on this, because they started to look.
He introduced Jonathan, who's going to talk about his latest kind of distillation of what the pandemic means to society, to biology, to science, and to democracy, and to the whole kind of idea of empiricism and integrity. And then each of us, this incredible preeminent panel that we have, each one of you is going to get a chance to comment on his thesis. I wanted to bring everybody together.
Secretary Kennedy and Marty and Jay are operating in a very complicated political landscape, and they just don't have the latitude to act unilaterally.